the other big story still remains the Epstein saga and Donald Trump's incredibly clumsy cover up of his involvement in the Epstein files. It's now been reported that he was told he was in the files.
Yeah.
Bloomberg this morning came out with a report saying he was one of the names that was redacted in the files. And this is entirely like his own fault. And it's so sloppy and uh incredible to me that he got himself into this situation where he thought he could appease people or he thought he could escape the very real reality that he was like friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and he must know that in his
Right. He
brain. Like,
definitely knows that. Yeah.
I mean, he's that deteriorated, and then we have another problem on our hands. But like the absolute egomania of thinking he could get away with this while running on releasing the Epstein files is astounding to me. And I don't know. It's hard for me to gauge how long this story is going to last, and I'd love your take on it
Hmm.
because one, I think that Mike Johnson unfortunately made the right move with this congressional recess. Like it is harder to keep the story in the news without there being pressure on the legislature that it was Ro Khanna and I think Massey was putting on them amongst other Democrats and as well. Um, but there is this drip, drip, drip. So I'm not sure, you know, what's your take on the political salience of this, basically? And you do a show with Sagar, who's on the right and is probably a little bit more in touch with like how his base is responding to this than maybe I am.
I mean, I think the base has bought his like either there's nothing to see here, or if there is, it's Hillary and Brennan and Comey. I think the base has already like accepted the like insanely stupid and transparent rationale and is happy to like move on and pretend there's nothing to see here. I think where he does take a hit from this is in that sort of like more independent bro podcast sphere. And it
Yeah.
just, this was key lore in terms of him positioning himself as a phony outsider, and so when you take that away, it makes it harder to maintain like you're this punk rock figure going after the system when you're the one now actively like both in the files and engaged in the cover up. So I think it has some salience there. I also have to say that our friends in the Democratic Party, many of them are like, oh, this is Watkins. Oh, it's just a distraction. And we really need to get back to talking about the one big, beautiful bill. And like, yes, that's very politically salient. We need to be talking about that. But you could do both. This is the sort of thing where if the roles were reversed, Republicans would never let this frickin' thing go. And yet Democratic leadership finds it kind of icky, or they're implicated, or they don't like the intel connections, or whatever it is. They don't go for the jugular in the same way, and maybe just aren't really capable of going for the jugular in any sort of circumstance, even when they want to. So unfortunately, I do think that sort of lessens some of the impact. The question is whether there are more revelations that keep the story alive. We're not going to get anything interesting from the government. They're working out whatever deal they're working out with Ghislaine Maxwell. I saw she was just transferred to a different federal prison in Texas. I don't know what that's all about, but it sure looks like there's some fuckery afoot there. So it all comes down to if there are leakers, if there's more information that comes out that sort of keeps the story alive. Otherwise, I think he takes a modest hit. I think he continues to slide with independents. I think he continues to fall off a cliff with young men has been a demographic group that has like fled him. But it ceases being the existential crisis that for a moment it felt like it might be.
Yeah, and it's just another example of Donald Trump just having different rules that apply to him than
Oh
have
my God,
applied to
yes.
other politicians. That is his like greatest power. Also, just the idea that he's such an idiot in so many other ways, but kind of a marketing savant as well. But like in terms of the drip, 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 what gives me a little bit of hope on this front is that like the voices of the victims, the traditional media is not they're more comfortable in that space and putting the victims' families forward to talk about their experience, which victims should not get lost in this. There's a lot of other I think important lessons that we could learn if we have more information about say intelligence ties, say government secrets, that kind of thing, that it's going to be a lot harder to get to. But last night, Virginia Giuffre's family went on CNN with Caitlin Collins, and this is what her brother had to say about Donald Trump and their continued kind of cover up about the Epstein files.
Was convicted of the crime.
Sky, when you hear the word stolen used to describe what happened to your sister when she was recruited away and sex trafficked, I wonder what goes through your mind.
She wasn't stolen. She was preyed upon at his property, at President Trump's property. And I think it's very important that we don't treat it like stolen. Seems very impersonal. It feels very much like an object, and these survivors are not objects. Women are not objects. What goes through my mind is that it's time to protect survivors, and it's time to protect the young women and our future generation of young women. So no, she wasn't stolen. She was preyed upon, and it certainly makes you kind of ask the question, how much he knew during that time, right? Even a couple of years later, even after he, I believe he had stated something along the lines of cutting off communication or kicking him out. He described Jeffrey Epstein as somebody who really enjoyed being around young women. And so she was preyed upon. She wasn't stolen. That's a predator that came and took her and did absolutely horrible things to her and so many other women out there.
Yeah. And
Danny, does it?
I think, Virginia was such a, anyone who's followed this story a little bit knows her as such a brave voice in this. I mean, she identified Prince Andrew as somebody who abused her. She was integral in kind of cobbling together some of the survivors to try to stand up to Jeffrey Epstein. And her life was not easy. And she died recently. And you hear how Trump callously speaks about her like property. I mean, this makes sense when you have a rapist as the president, but I wonder, like, we saw this campaign of misogyny from the outset in 2024 with Donald Trump, with fantasies about Kamala getting beaten up, to she's a slut, to whatever it is. And I know that the right doesn't care about that, and they kind of get off on the idea of a Democrat or a black woman being humiliated like that in their view. But when it comes to these survivors, a story that they've followed, maybe this isn't the MAGA base, but it's like young independents that listen to Andrew Schultz or Theo Vaughn or whatever. They've got to go, this is disgusting. And this is also a cover up. This guy's one of the elites that I hate, even though he positioned himself in every way to show that he's outside of that. And then, frankly, the Democrats don't do him any favors by any favors by separating Republicans from Trump's brand altogether.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think Virginia's brother there makes some really important points. I mean, first of all, just the language of she was stolen from Mar-a-Lago is so disgusting and does reveal a mentality about women that I think he and Epstein shared, which is that they're not humans. They're like, they are objects to be traded around or used for your own enjoyment, used as to give you status, let me surround myself. That's why he buys the pageants and, has the modeling age. Let me surround myself with them because it makes me look better. I mean, it is, I think, less about sex drive for Trump and more this sort of transactional proprietary approach to women where they're just another object for him to manipulate in his own image crafting. And so, first of all, the language of stolen really speaks to that. But yeah, of course, it doesn't raise questions about whether Trump knew what was going on. Trump knew what was going on.
Yeah.
He knew this young girl, 16, I think at the time, was trafficked from his organization. It's after that, as her brother points out, that he gives a quote saying Jeffrey likes him young. They were best friends for years and years, close enough for him to pen this like very romantic seeming birthday note, and with the sketch of the naked woman and his signature as the pubic hair, to Jeffrey Epstein. There's no way that you were frequenting those circles. We know he organized a party with all of these girls where the only male guest was Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't know what else he was into. I don't know what, Mossad or whoever may have on him. He certainly acts like they got a lot. But I think it would be preposterous to think that he didn't know something of what was going on here.
What do you think of the Democrats? This is a good way for us to sort of transition to the Slotkin interview, but their uncomfortability with this topic. It's depressing to me that in 2008 we had Obama get elected in no small part due to opposition to the Iraq War, and there was an opportunity for the Democrats to extricate themselves from a defense, the military-industrial complex, basically, Zionism, hawkish policy in the Middle East, and that's not what happened at all. In fact, Obama was saying, let's turn the page. We don't need to prosecute these war criminals. And we're at a point right now where you have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying things like genocide, and Bernie Sanders won't say that. And this is not for me to say. This is connected to Epstein in the sense that there is clearly a conspiracy here. This is not a conspiracy theory. It may make people in powerful uncomfortable. It may make our intelligence gathering uncomfortable, and it may reveal some dark truths about either U.S. intelligence, Israeli intelligence, or people in power using information like this as blackmail for their own ends. How can the Democrats not be comfortable in that space when it's being handed to them on a silver platter just because of Trump's own incompetence? And this is an opportunity to at least play act as anti-establishment, right? In this way, just ask questions. But they're incapable of doing it because I think that they're so thoroughly captured by a professional class that is way more invested in the maintenance of a system than they are in any other kind of politics. And that includes our military-industrial complex, our intelligence gathering, wealth concentration, what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things that are probably going on for different Democrats and the sort of like liberal commentariat. Number one is they want to see themselves as like, the party of science and reason. And this all feels sort of like icky and conspiratorial and QAnon adjacent. So because it became kind of like this right-wing coded thing, weirdly, even though it shouldn't have been, it's, a lot of the facts and evidence are just out in the public. Trump himself is deeply implicated, et cetera. But it became kind of like a right-wing coded fixation. And so they just think it's sort of icky. And that's why they don't really want to get into the mud on that. That's for some of them. And then for some of them, I think they either know or suspect that he was tied in with intel, that, there are it was a bipartisan, sex trafficking ring that Democrats won't be spared. And so they're not interested in digging too deeply into what this all looks like and turning over that rock and seeing what's underneath either.
Right. I think you're dead on about that. There are some Democrats who are staying on this, but once again, it feels like, as opposed to how the Republicans lead the media in a certain direction, Benghazi, whatever, the Democrats have to be led kicking and screaming.
They also just don't, even if they wanted to, they don't know how. Like, they just don't even know how to, and many of them don't want to. But even if they did, like, they have no idea how to be current, relevant, controversial, stand for something. They're just such dinosaurs, completely like wandering around the modern world, wondering what's going on around them.
Yeah. And the line of demarcation is appearing to be Israel right now. I mean, there's an article in the New York Times that is just incredible, entitled, Fed Up with Netanyahu and His Handling of Gaza War, Democrats Rebuke Israel. And you have quotes from Richie Torres in here saying that the Democrats are now done with Netanyahu. I mean, we had to get support for Israel's military action to single digits within the Democratic Party for them to do any kind of change on this front, apparently. But I love this paragraph here. already some pro-Israel Democrats are quietly wondering whether they will have any representation on the 2028 presidential primary debate stage, or if support for the country, however nuanced, will be regarded as a liability. Inshallah, from ink to God's ears or eyes or whatever, that would be incredible if that were the case.
Yeah,
but
indeed.
How I don't. So now they aren't in power anymore. So maybe it's more convenient for them. But it's not just them not being in power. They could have flipped on opposition to sending arms to Israel earlier on when they weren't in power in the year. It's the starvation, or in my view, it's cynically the fact that they know that we are past the point of no return at a certain level, and they have information that we do not fully have access to in the Senate, and especially in the Senate in terms of intelligence. And they might be aware that, like, we are talking about irreversible starvation to death of thousands and thousands of people, and Israel's just like bulldozing the entire north, so there's going to be no ability to collect the bodies and count folks. But we're in hundreds of thousands of deaths here, and our media in the United States is still saying like 80,000 or something like that. But it seems like there's a covering your ass element here that is...
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what that turning point really was internally.
Yeah, I think it's cynical all the way around. Cynical from a historical perspective of they want to be able years from now to say, oh, look at this statement that I put out. Look at this thing I said on the, House floor about how terrible it was that these babies were being starved to death. And just don't take a look at my voting record where I voted to, send the bombs and give all the support for this ongoing genocide. So, and it's also incredibly cynical from a political perspective. Now, I would like them to be more cynical from a political perspective and wake up to the fact that there's no issue I can think of in my lifetime where the vast bulk of Democratic elected officials are so at odds with where the base is. I mean, it is so stark. I've never seen anything like it. And it is a testament to the power of the Israel lobby and the way they form these relationships over time and keep people in check. That it has gone this long and this far without people even stepping back one iota. So now they're trying to search for like a centrist approach to genocide, and there isn't one. And I don't think that they understand that. You see, are you familiar with Mallory McMorrow? She's running in the Michigan Senate from.
Yep.
She tried to she's like a Liz Smith candidate, and she tried to put out this like cut off the offensive weapons, and I'm upset, but release the hostages. They're trying, and this is what Slotkin tried to do in the interview with me as well. They're trying to find a middle ground approach to genocide, and that is not a tenable position. Liberal Zionism is no longer a tenable position, and I think that almost none of them really realize that that is the case, and that if you are not out there, if you had anything to do with this, like if you voted for the arms and you aren't out there saying, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that, if you aren't doggedly doing everything you can with all your power at this point to make this stop, like that is the only correct and reasonable position at this point. And if you aren't there, then you I don't care what you have to say about anything else. And this was one of the things when I was thinking about the interview with Slotkin, there were two things that I really wanted to know and wanted to get across to her. And one of them is I really wanted her to understand, because I think she's a cynical political actor. If you don't understand this is a genocide and aren't willing to use your power to try to stop it, no one cares what you have to say about anything else. It is a moral red line litmus test issue, and it should be, and it has to be, and it will be. And she clearly doesn't understand that. And I think very few Democrats do understand that, frankly. And then the other thing that I wanted to know is just like, how do you live with yourself? I genuinely, that's what I've asked myself so many days about like her and the other Hasbaras. And I don't even mean to just pick on her because this is just so common among the political class, among the media class. Like, I am torn up by what I see every day in my timeline. How are you not feeling that? Like, are you not fully human? How do you live with having sent these weapons? Like, how does that not eat you up inside? I genuinely don't understand, because I feel guilty about not doing more myself. I think about it all the time. Yeah. And yet here you are complicit, and you're just like going about your life and just doing the same things. I can't understand it.
I mean, I will never be the same. I know that you and we're experiencing this in incredible comfort relative to the people in Gaza, and I will, never obviously look at the United States or power the same way, and that's how the world is reacting. And